Hello and welcome to the Authority of Love. I'm your host, Greg Williams, and I'm joined again by our co-host, David Walls, for a Family Foundation Friday. Remember, at Love and Lordship, our heart desires every life and relationship built on the love and lordship of Jesus Christ. We got a lot to discuss today, and we have a special guest who is now, by the way, just recently a fully fledged Kentucky attorney passing the bar. David, why don't you introduce our special guest today?
Yeah, no, excited to have Jesse Green with us. He's been working with us for several months now and been doing tremendous work, speaking all across the state for us and doing a lot of other stuff, but excited. We got Jesse on the hot seat. He's going to explain all the election results across the nation in the next 13 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and let's do this. First of all, I got to give an update. My little granddaughter, Gwen, was a week old yesterday. She's growing like a weed. She's doing well. Mom's doing well. Dad's doing well. And Papaw's doing great. So excited about that, David.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. She's adorable. She's beautiful. Of course, I would say that, but she is. David, no comment on your house, right? Hurricane hit house.
We're just plugging away.
Okay, good. And we already said, Jesse, that you passed the bar. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a great job. We need more like you in that realm.
Oh, yeah.
Appreciate it. My brother's actually a lawyer, too, so he's a good one. And Stan Cave and he were best friends in college at UK Law School. So anyway, I want to jump into this. I think to start with, David, Jesse, just a kind of a federal level recap. I think overall it was a pretty good conservative win. Agreed?
Yeah, I mean, look, this was, if we're going to talk obviously about the national elections first, the race for president, it was a historic victory for President Trump on a variety of fronts. I mean, one, just simply because you had a president that had been in office, then not in office, and then overwhelmingly reelected again. That's a historic just by itself. Yeah. I think... obviously, I don't want to spend too much time about this, but a lot of the predictions were obviously wrong again. I mean, as we sit here, an overwhelming victory for President Trump in the Electoral College. Looks like he overwhelmingly won the popular vote. Republicans took back the Senate. Still, not 100% sure, but it looks like Republicans are in a good position to retain the House of Representatives. And so, one of my big takeaways is, and I think this is clear, I think President Trump focused on, in his campaign, focused on the issues that voters cared about the most, which at the end of the day, sometimes we hear, right, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, he focused very strongly on the state of the economy, the concern about out of control inflation, the concern about out of control immigration that is impacting people's lives, and so I think I think that resonated with voters. I also think it was a very clear his election was a very clear repudiation of the radical left. And it's just clear that they have simply gone too far in promoting, whether it be woke, transgender, gender ideology that we've talked so much about. Greg, and I know we're going to bring Jesse into this as we talk about some of the votes on the abortion initiatives, but it was very clear that Vice President Harris and her entire campaign was primarily centered around a right to abortion, a right to kill an unborn child. That was what she was most animated about.
Bashing Trump. That was the only two things you almost don't heard, right?
And I think it's very fair to say that didn't resonate. I'm not saying it, that we won all these pro-life votes. Unfortunately, we didn't. But the reality was voters were more focused on other issues. And I think you can say that, Republicans that have stood strong on the life issue, they were overwhelmingly reelected in districts, both at the federal level and, as we'll talk a little bit about here in Kentucky, our General Assembly was looks like it's going to essentially be unchanged, which means there's a very strong pro-life and pro-family majority in the General Assembly. So I think there's a lot to be encouraged by in that, and I think it opens up the door, both federally, but here in Kentucky, and I've heard from some legislators here in Kentucky that were, enthused about the election results. We've got an opportunity to move forward and continue to make serious progress, pushing back against protecting parental rights, pushing back against, woke ideologies that are being taught in our schools, and defending religious liberty. There's an opportunity to continue to move forward with a bold agenda, and ultimately, that's what we care about is public policy that honors the Lord. And so I think our takeaway from the election is voters have sent back, generally speaking, legislative bodies that have opportunities to move forward on those issues.
And I'll say two things, and Jesse, I want to hear what you think about those abortion initiatives. I think we were talking about that. Number one, when you have that amount of power, our prayer as Christians ought to be make sure that people remain humble.
Absolutely.
Because you've heard the quote, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and you don't know it until you get there.
Yeah.
But it does almost every time. So we've got to be careful in that. The second thing is that I think it not only helps to push forward with that agenda here in Kentucky, but it also stops the radical agenda of Governor Beshear.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing that we can do that. Jesse, I know David brought you on to do this. Speak to how that turned out as far as on the national level and the states that had that on their agenda.
Yeah, so abortion was on the ballot in about 10 states, and about half of those were blue states. They voted pretty overwhelmingly to put abortion in their constitution.
No surprise.
Yeah, no. Those states already had incredibly liberal abortion laws, so nothing really changes except putting it in their state constitution. Now, there were about 5 red states that had abortion on the ballot. You had Florida, Nebraska, South Dakota, Montana, and Missouri. And in 3 of those 5 states, the abortion amendment lost. And so the pro-life laws in those states remain in effect. And actually in Nebraska, they put a abortion ban after the first trimester in their constitution. So even better than just stopping the pro-abortion amendment, they got some pro-life protections in their constitution going forward.
Yeah.
So I do want to say, especially in Florida, it was looking pretty bad early on, but Governor DeSantis was an incredibly strong leader on pro-life stuff, and he really carried the day with defeating that amendment there.
It was incredibly, look, the Florida thing, we need to, Governor DeSantis deserves a ton of credit. Mm-hmm. And let's not forget, that is now the 3rd largest state in the nation. So it would have been, an unmitigated disaster for preborn babies if Florida had gone from a state that has pretty strong pro-life laws to a liberalized state. And Nebraska too. And I know our family policy council friends in Nebraska were so intimately involved in their strategy when they knew that the pro-abortion side was going to put a pro-abortion, their strategy to put a competing initiative to give voters something positive to vote for ended up being a winning strategy. And I think that's potentially something we all need to take away from this. Even here in Kentucky, and as we've talked about, the pro-life movement needs to stop being so much on the defense and say, we're going to push the ball forward and give a positive pro-life agenda. So some good takeaways, but even, it still breaks my heart, even in the states that we were not surprised in, to see states ratify a right to kill an unborn child in their constitution. We one of the takeaways is we're thankful the streak was broken. Now the pro-abortion side cannot say they've won all of these votes, and that is significant. But we have a lot to work to do on the life issue.
And 2 things again, as you guys talk, how often have we heard the statement, what a great leader Ron DeSantis is?
Yeah.
How long have we got to remember that moving forward.
Yeah.
We hear that a lot. And secondly, I heard this on the opposite side of that. If Florida would have passed that, people would have literally gone to Florida, got an abortion, and then gone to the beach.
Yeah.
To think about what that sounds like. I heard people talking about that. So glad that his leadership and it turned out that way.
Yeah.
The medical recreational marijuana.
Yeah,
David,
we'll let Jesse quickly do that.
Mm.
And then
So there were 3 states that had recreational marijuana on their ballot, both the Dakotas and then Florida as well. And Governor DeSantis mobilized against that amendment as well in Florida. And all 3 of them failed. And actually, in Massachusetts, they had a vote on whether they wanted to have harder drugs legalized there, called psychedelics. Psychedelics, and Colorado had previously legalized those in a ballot initiative, and surprisingly, Massachusetts pretty overwhelmingly voted that down. Wow. So we might be starting to see a little bit of a shift when it comes to the drug issue on the ballot.
Let me say this, see if you agree, and then we want to close with a couple things. Would you guys agree, Jesse, you've dove into this a little more, would you agree? We knew even beforehand because of what's being pushed. Two things. We knew that medical marijuana would be a stepping stone to recreational. But now we're seeing results, even in the medical field, of people getting addicted and some of the negative outcomes of this. Is that part of this? And hopefully it is, and this continues.
Well, in terms of ballot stuff, it seems like medical marijuana is still passing overwhelmingly.
But to make it recreational,
that has been in a number of states. You have seen that being used as a way to to start a market and then try to do full recreational legalization, which is people out on the street smoking without,
like cigarettes,
basically,
And so I hope that trend continues.
Yeah.
Maybe even to say, maybe we need to back off medical marijuana a bit because there are bad outcomes. Got to bring this up. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry on myself and everybody else because I've defended it and will continue to do so. Amendment 2. David?
Yeah, certainly disappointed that Amendment 2 failed, didn't get the votes needed, and failed, with a pretty high percentage of
Almost
Kentuckians
2-1,
voting against it. Look, the reality is Kentucky's one-size-fits-all education system is not working. And so what does this mean? This means, unfortunately, that Kentucky students are going to continue to be left behind in schools that are not working for them, that the many students that are being trapped in schools that don't fit their needs is going to continue. We're going to continue to be strong advocates for school choice and just more educational opportunities. We're also going to continue to advocate for policies to strengthen our public schools and to get woke ideology as we have out of the schools so schools can focus on what needs to be taught. I'll let Jesse jump in here because I know he did a lot of work to educate folks, and we got a lot of education left to do on that issue.
Oh, clearly. For sure. Yeah. I mean, it was 35-65 against, which is a pretty substantial margin. You can't really blame one particular thing. Ultimately there was a lot of misinformation floating around, and ultimately that won the day. And so we have to do some work to make sure people realize the benefits of school choice, especially as states like Tennessee are about to drastically expand their programs after this election.
I believe Texas is going to move forward with a massive school choice program after this election. So again, heartbroken for what it means for students in Kentucky. We want to see parents and families empowered, but we've got some work to do.
I would add that to this, and I think you guys will agree. From a biblical standpoint, well, let me say this first. From a quality standpoint, it's going to keep Kentucky students at or near the bottom in almost every indicator, and that's sad. But even more than that, more importantly than that, from a biblical standpoint, God mandated that parents be the primary educators of their children, not the government. And in public schools, especially in places where they're predominant, government becomes, and we see the outcomes of that. So I hope that Christian pastors and teachers and churches will wake up and go, wait a minute, this is actually harming us as a whole and in our culture and even in our churches with the things that are taught there. Let's change it. If they want that, they can have it in school choice. But as Christians can walk away and say, there's other things that we can do. So appreciate that. David, any closing contact information? Give them that again.
Again, to remind folks, we're now very close to the upcoming legislative session. Great time to get signed up with us at KentuckyFamily.org. And we look forward to advocating for a bold pro-family agenda in this upcoming session. And I think, as we said, the election results are going to mean there's a lot of members that are going to be interested in doing that too.
Thanks, David. Co-host, special guest Jesse Green. Thank you for joining.